honey. Honey isn't one color, and it's not one consistency, and it's not one flavor. You have honeys that are that come from clover. That honey is almost pure white, and it tastes of clover, and it tastes of clover flower. And then later, again, back to 8 to 12 seconds later, 15 maybe, it tastes like honey. Molasses, sorghum, the bees that forage on a sorghum, the nectar that they bring back and the honey that they make out of that is almost black. It tastes almost like molasses at the beginning. It ends in honey. Some citrus honeys taste like the citrus up front and then honey. So everything the first flavor on your lips is what the bees were eating, not the flavor of honey. And so true enough, you know, I think that that very similar to a wine, that when you get a hyper-local product, you can taste the flavor of that 2 miles. And people should be trying to taste that flavor. They shouldn't be going, oh, this tastes like honey, how wonderful. Because usually that's corn syrup they're tasting that's just been dyed yellow. Well, there's multiple things about that. Processed honey is either a proprietary blend, which means that the beekeeper is taking his honey and mixing it with something else. Now, it might be his other honey. Where he got that from, I'm not quite sure. But they're mixing this concoction together, so it has a similar look, a similar smell, a similar taste, a similar everything, a similar color. So that's proprietary blend. And in that, it could be, although they're calling it raw, in these things called dryer lines. The honey is spun, it goes through this thing called a dryer line on the way to the tank before it goes into the drums or the bottles. And even though they're spinning it and saying they're not heat processing it, those dryer lines get to 350 degrees to evaporate the water. Okay, so the honey doesn't get to 350 degrees as well. Seems to me like they're super cooking it, which is why super cooked honey will stay liquid. It won't crystallize quickly. Real honey will crystallize quite quickly as soon as it gets into a jar or plastic or whatever it gets into, because that's what it does. It's a sugar. What we do is we take what the bees actually give us and put it into jars, and we either do that through spinning. If it's wild honey, it gets put into our solar melters, and so then even better. So most honey you buy in the store, it has parts per million of pollen in its honey. Our honey has probably teaspoons per gallon of pollen. Millions of parts per part, or however that would work. Because everything that was in the honeycomb, the propolis, the royal jelly, the pollen, the bee bread, the honey goes into the solar melter, the wax is separated, and so you have a much more, our wild honey has a much more gritty flavor and taste off the bat. At about 96 degrees, that grit goes away because that's where pollen melts. But your first intake of our wild honey is that grittiness. And that grittiness is the actual pollen that you're tasting on your tongue, which is the beneficial part of and the medicinal part of the actual honey.